It's about service companies looking for that opportunity to spin out a new product, something that's scalable, can help them drive revenue to a whole new level.
Yeah.
And we've been going for a couple weeks now here.
Yeah, if you're just joining, you probably want to go back to the beginning of the shows, kind of go through a lot of good content. We're trying to break it down into kind of a step-by-step, making it actionable. If this is new to you, you've never spun out a brand new product from your service-based business, there's a lot to take in.
There's a lot to it.
Yeah, so we want kind of step-by-step. We're getting close to the end here. Today we're going to talk branding.
Yeah, this is one of our favorite topics, and we actually have a whole series just on branding, which I think is worth people to go back. It was the one before this, and we really talked about that as the process of how do you differentiate yourself. So we're actually going to touch on a number of those topics today, but we literally did, I think, 10 to 12 episodes all on this entire process. But now that we've gone through this whole shebang here where we've developed product ideas and talked about understanding the market, and we talked about developing the product and all of these different things, we're now here kind of getting to the branding, and then our next episode's about the marketing piece of it. So today we're going to dive into this topic. I think branding's something that's near and dear to both of our hearts, and for me it's really about, a lot of people think when they look at brand or hear the word brand, they think about a logo. Everybody says, oh, brand is great, and they think of the Nike logo, but there's so much more to it. A brand for me is really what you use to differentiate yourself in the market. How do you develop messaging and a look and a language to both differentiate yourself and clearly articulate why people should want to do business with you? And so when someone gets to a website or sees an ad, they're instantly, have some rapport with it, and they understand crystal clear what you do, and then they're convinced to move forward in the process.
Yeah, I recently had a conversation with somebody on the topic of brand, and given where we're at today, dealing with, especially for service-based businesses, a lot of them, right, it's just silent right now because of what's going on in the world. And I explained, I said, think of it this way, brand is what keeps the restaurants and places that people are saying, oh no, I'm gonna support those guys. I want to make sure that they stay in business, right? The ones that trigger some type of feeling like, oh, we got to help these guys out, or I really want to eat there. Looking at restaurants, right? So I think brand is a big part of how people, that emotional feeling that we get when we think about a particular company, that's brand. So a lot goes into brand. It's not just the logo, it's the feeling, it's where you position them in the marketplace, compare it to their competition. There's a lot that goes into that a lot of people miss when they just think brand. They think, oh, we want that logo to look cool and memorable. That's part of it. There's a lot more that goes into it.
And I think it's important for companies to establish the brand up front and actually go through a process. That's the thing in our previous series that we really focused on, is showing what the process is to uncover or develop a brand. And it's not something that you literally sit in a room and go, okay guys, what makes us different, and how do we want to look to the marketplace? You should literally go through a process that helps you discover what the best approach is.
Yeah, for sure.
So let's talk about, the first piece is really, what are the different elements of a brand that you look at? And we've kind of broke it down to 6. There are some other ones, but these are the core 6 that we tend to look at. First, target audiences. For me, it's not about trying to go after everybody. I think especially startups and spin-outs, and I've seen this, is a spin-out where there's a service company developing a software, and all of a sudden, before they've even launched it, they've got 30 different audiences they want to go after. But to me, it's about how do we prioritize those and understand which are the best to go after, based off of things like competition, opportunity, specialization, profitability. We should be able to evaluate those things and determine these are our top 3 markets, or even top 1 market that we really want to go after. Especially launching out new, the last thing you want to do is spread yourself so thin across 30 audiences that you don't get the penetration.
Well, it's hard to differentiate yourself when you're trying to be all things to all people.
Right.
Become really good at one or two things, get really focused. Then you can always grow out to include additional target markets, but you need to start with a narrow focus.
And that's probably one of my biggest that I try and push our clients and other people on is, it's great to think big and have all these big ideas of the places that you can go with your product, but let's start somewhere slim and really capture as much of the marketplace. Then we can expand with a lot more power, behind that. Number 2, and again, this is another one that I really like, value proposition. So this is what defines you as different in the marketplace. What is it that you, compared to other people, what makes you completely different? And so really defining that to me, before I want to do any marketing or go out, I want to be able to clearly articulate, this is what makes me different than anyone else. So that when I'm talking to someone, I say, yeah, you could consider that, but this is what separates us, and really that's no longer an option because we're so unique to what we are.
Yeah, really, when I think of really great marketing, I think of marketing that kind of removes the resistance. Mm-hmm. It makes it just an obvious decision. It makes the sales process just taking an order, right? And that's, to me, that's the most elementary piece there is the value proposition. So everything plays into that, but in one component that to me is like do or die. That is the one that's most crucial.
And we've talked about that for a couple people, is how do you reduce the friction in the sales process? If you're selling a big ERP software out there, and it takes 6 months to get through the sale, 6 months to onboard them, and you've developed this, well, imagine if you narrowed down your audience to only industrial distribution, and then from there you said, here are 3 things that make us so different, and one of them is we're really specialized to your needs, high security this. When someone comes in, they're going to see that, and it's just there aren't going to be options because you're so unique, and you've really narrowed into that target audience. And that's how those two fit together, is you're trying to tie your value propositions to that target audience to reduce the friction through the marketing and sales process. So really important. Brand voice is really a definition of what you look like and sound like. It's kind of the visuals. It ties into that logo piece and what people call identity. But really, brand voice for me is persona, tone, language, and purpose. And you define those to really create a consistent sound and look and purpose across everything that you do.
Yeah, and I think a good way to think about it is think of some brands that you're on their mailing list, you get an email. Some brands are going to speak in a very kind of professional, kind of corporate tone, and others are more playful, just kind of like talking to a friend or something, and they have fun, colorful visuals, and others have very bold and
100%.
That's what we're talking about here, is that everything
and
that goes
defining it
voice.
So that whenever anyone does any marketing or does anything, they're going back and they're using that as their compass to make sure everybody's headed in the same direction.
And that's why the audience is important, because that should be something that makes sense. If you're
100%.
dealing with a really tightly wound professional audience, it's probably going to be a voice that matches that. You don't want to be the fun kind of hippie if that's your audience, right? But on the other side of things, that's going to look different. So,
were you a hippie?
Just for a while, back in the day.
Just checking. Good. Positioning statements. So for me, these are just kind of guiding principles, like what's your flag in the ground? What do you believe? I like statements like that are, this is what we believe. It's kind of the emotional, passionate thing behind, who you are and what you're trying to accomplish. Your elevator pitch, what's that? You get into an elevator, you have 7 seconds to explain what you do. How do you do that very, simply, concisely, and make sure that it really gets across? So there's some different key positioning statements that really leverage off of value propositions, but then they use your brand voice for how you want to sound, and then they create these core statements that help really just be the hub of your brand messaging that will end up going out, when we talk about key messages.
And defining those statements is really important, because First of all, concise language is very powerful. So if I could say something a little bit simpler than I do today, tomorrow, I'm probably going to be more effective. The other thing is that you can help other people, both your team internally, but other people, maybe even your customers, tell somebody else about you, for a referral opportunity. If you can deliver that message in a very simple way that's easy to absorb, and then say, oh, let me tell that story appropriately to someone else, very powerful. So positioning statements are really useful across the board.
Yeah, and a lot of times, one way to describe it is the headlines. You see headlines across the site. It's that simple language. It's the first thing people read. All of that. And so, the one thing that I tend to do, you think about elevator pitch. If you hear some founders, every room they go into, it's different, and they're kind of making it up as they go. What you want is the entire company or anybody involved to say it the same way every time, and it to be strategically developed so that when you say it, you're saying it in a way that comes across to fit those things like value propositions and this other stuff. And then we really get into key messaging, which, like I said, if the positioning statements are the hub, these are the spokes that are going out. And so the key messages are, what are the foundation of like the proof behind what our messages are, what's our aspirations, other things like that we're developing messaging out from there. And then finally, brand identity. So this is kind of the visual side. So again, across from brand voice is going to give a sense of how you should look, but brand identity is the true design, the colors, the fonts, the identity logo, and all of those different pieces.
Yeah.
So these are the 6 elements, and I basically say if you don't have all of these well defined, you haven't gone through a process of really thinking about it and doing each of these strategically, then that does not set up a foundation for growth. It is going to really hurt you when you go out to do marketing, because you're not going to understand the who, the how, and the why of going out and really being able to get people to convert or buy or whatever it might be.
Yeah, I think it's important to just grasp all this stuff. A lot of times we'll talk to prospects who are interested in working with us, and we'll say, well, can't we just get right to the marketing piece of the strategy? And then you go through this and they understand, oh wow, that's like, all this is so foundational that you're building everything off of there, and you need a strong foundation.
Yeah.
So really important starting point.
100%. So the first place we talk about evaluating audiences, and this is where in our previous series we really dove in, but we'll quickly kind of describe this. So evaluating your audiences, I really like exercises and doing things logically, and you can really see this in, I think, our past series, and we've got a guidebook associated to that. But there's really 5 things that we look at evaluating for audiences. One is opportunity. How big is the market? So you want to look at, if we're doing ERP and we break up audiences into manufacturer, this type of manufacturing, this other type, what's the opportunity that's out there for those different pieces? Demand. How hungry is the audience? A great example now for me, we've got a couple clients in the data analytics space, hospital systems. For data and analytics, there's a huge opportunity and there's a high demand, is that they're really hungry for getting more data and analytics for what they're doing. Level of competition. So, how many alternatives are there in the marketplace, whether they're direct competition or something that someone can use instead of you. And you really want to measure that to understand, how hard is it going to be to get market share. And so if the opportunity is huge, but the competition is eating up 98% of the market, that's a challenge. Then we look at, level of experience. So, how long have you been doing it? If you're going again after data analytics for hospital systems, have you been doing that for 5 or 10 years? Do you have certifications in that area, specifically training? What's your experience level?
I was just going to add, seeing that we're on the topic of spin out, in a lot of cases, like your experience, you'll be able to take what you've done in your professional service that you offer and translate that maybe a little bit differently. Maybe it's not one-to-one exactly the same, but you're probably bringing a ton of experience to the table.
100%.
So you want to work that in.
And we're seeing that with a client of ours now. They've been in the industry for 25 years, they're developing a spin-out product that's related to their industry, I mean, their level of experience compared to another company that might just create the product is massive. And then the final one is really specialization. And for me, when we're talking about software, is how unique is that software to the target audience? The more that you've got features specifically for it, you can really develop a specialization. And so together, if we're ranking these each from like 1 to 5 or 1 to 10, how much opportunity, how much demand, how much competition, your level of experience, and the level of specialization, we should be able to come out with a mathematical equation to say these are the 1, 2, or 3 target industries or audiences that we really need to focus in on.
And if you're spinning out a product, you might already have all of this identified for your service business, but this might be different. This might be entirely different. Right. Or it might include we talked in past episodes, sometimes the product you're spinning out is something that you're selling now to your competitors, right, in your service business. So these components might be slightly different or significantly different. So important to go through this exercise, even if you have your brand well defined for your service business.
Yes, 100%. So when we expand upon target audiences, the next one's really personas. And so what do we have with personas that you and I like to really look at?
Yeah, so looking at the motivations and then the buying factors. So why do they take that action to purchase and choose your product over the competition? So the motivations, that's what are those driving forces?
And I usually see that as more emotional. We're looking at things like pride and wealth. I'm motivated to get money. I'm motivated to show that I'm the smartest in the room. There are things that are driving me to do stuff that are a little bit more to my core values and my emotions, and are just a little bit more foundational. And that's what a motivation is. But then a buying factor is really what I make a decision off of. And a great example that I like to use that just dumbs it down is, I'm hungry. Mm-hmm. My motivation is I'm really hungry or I'm really thirsty, but my buying factor might be I am a vegetarian. So I only eat things that are, vegetarian, or I have to do gluten-free.
I didn't know that about you, the vegetarian.
I'm the opposite. I'm pretty much a carnivore only. But those are buying factors, things that I'm going to use to determine if I buy there. So when I'm looking at restaurants or food, those are criteria. Is it cheap? Is it expensive? If I might have hunger, but then also pride, and that drives me to an expensive restaurant where I really want to make sure that I'm showing off to people that I can afford this and I'm doing well, and maybe I'm trying to impress someone, but I'm also hungry. So there's different things that motivate people to take actions, but then what are the reasons they actually decide to choose something? Yeah. And so we really want to break those out. Those are typically, for me, the most important pieces of a persona, is to understand what's driving them, because these two things are going to really tie into our value propositions and positioning statements.
Yeah, very good.
So value propositions, we kind of talked about this, so I don't think we have to go in too much depth, but really it is about how do you determine what makes you unique in the marketplace. I'm a huge fan of blue ocean strategy, which is, in a red ocean, there's so much competition, there's blood in the water and it's red. How do you find that blue ocean and really create something where there's no one there? And to me, what we talked about blue ocean, you definitely reduce the resistance in marketing and sales and getting people through that pipeline when you find that blue ocean. Yeah. And so sometimes, it's a mix of what you do as a company, but more so how you position yourself. The great example to me is I think about quality or support. We always hear that one of the main factors that differentiates someone is support. Well, unfortunately, everyone says support. So what you need to do is even if that is one, how do you break that down into truly an articulate statement that says, we're number one at support because, we're 24/7. You can talk to a top-level exec the first time. Mm-hmm. We always respond within 2 hours, whatever it might be, and we developed the 5-star support program. And the 5 stars deal with, how fast we answer, what level of support you get, what the follow-up is, and that's why we have this 5-star support program. And now if you got 10 people in the market and they're saying we're great at support, but you can come in and say, no, we're not great at support. We have a 5-star support program, and here's how we do it. This star, this star, this star, this star. Now you have a way to articulate what makes you unique in a way that your competitors can.
So you're really defining what that means, as opposed to just a vague generalization.
Yep. So there's 2 stages to it. One, what are those things that make you different in the marketplace? And there's a process to figuring that out, and that could be, that's based off of those motivations and buying factors. Is it security, industry expertise, support, whatever those factors are. And we go through an exercise to figure out what are the 2 to 3 that really make you different. But then the next step is, how do we articulate them in a way to really drive in the fact of the true difference compared to anybody else. And so we should be able to put those 3 together, and literally if people are comparing us with anyone, if those are the 3 things we put in front of the potential client, they should not see them as competitors anymore. Do you want to talk about brand voice a little bit?
Sure. So when we look at the brand voice, we're talking about, as you mentioned a little bit earlier, persona, tone, language, and purpose. So persona is, who is this person that you're representing? What does this brand look like?
Yep.
So think of a person. What are they like, right? If you introduce yourself, your name is one thing, but then your behavior and how you act is...
Yeah, persona, I always think of, I try to picture a person in my head. For us, to me, it's always, that founder that's maybe exited out of a couple businesses, but you meet him for coffee and he's wearing jeans and a t-shirt. So he's got this relaxed feel, but very experienced and knowledgeable, and willing to tell you things that you don't want to hear, but do it in a way that's still positive. And so in my head, I kind of picture this persona of who we are, and I think that's good for companies to do. For another business, it might be someone that's a button-down person, or like you said, the hippie, whatever it might be. We're kind of imagining what we look like and kind of feel like to the marketplace. Tone is really what's the vibe and sound. So, how do we sound to the marketplace? All of those. Language, what kind of words do we use? Are we savvy? Are we simple? And then finally, purpose. Things like, are we here to educate, motivate, inspire, whatever it might be. And so when we talk or when we create content, we're trying to do 1 or 2 of those things.
And powerful brands always have this all well defined. It's something that really stands out. You can almost, when you read an advertisement, a communication from them, you can almost guess who it is if you didn't see the logo on there. You just read the copy.
Yep.
So
that's what should happen. If you've developed a good brand voice, everything you should put out, people should start to recognize it without even seeing the logo. And that is starting to create a brand. Consistent messaging, same value propositions, consistent look, consistent sound, all of that stuff. And then we talked about some of these different positioning statements. I always like the short identifier, something simple that says, this is who you are. We're a strategic consultancy. Your flag in the ground. What's that we believe statement?
People like someone who stands for something.
Right.
An organization who stands for something. Not, we can do everything. It's we believe in this, and we will never change. Right. It's stand for.
I think I love the we believes because I think they're strong. If you take those into marketing and sales in a strong way and say, again, data and analytics, we believe that information drives smart decisions, and you need to have at the tip of your fingertips, every piece of data in a concise way. It's we believe this, and now you can say, look, this is what our organization is behind. So I really love those types of statements. Elevator pitch, that quick thing that just describes kind of the who, what, but very quickly and concisely. So it's different than flag in the ground. Flag is why, elevator pitch is what, And then position statement, so that's the how, more describing how you do what you do. And then finally, kind of the tagline, or what I call the value summary. Most people taglines, they like to just come up with random stuff. I really want to make sure that it summarizes the value propositions and gets across what makes us different.
When this stuff is all working together is when it's most effective. So
100%.
To that point.
And then really this final piece, I think, is the brand guide. So what we want to do when we develop a really cohesive brand is write it down on paper and hand it out to everybody on our team, so that no matter what you do or what department you're in, you know how to talk about the company. If you create something, you know how it should sound and look, all of these different pieces.
Yeah. If your brand is representative of you and your values and everything you want to communicate,
it's not Corona.
I think it's time
water.
to get checked.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, your brand is super important for the consistency and the repetition, and so you want to ensure that everybody has it, everyone's on the same page internally, and this is a great way to help communicate that, and so everyone can understand how the representation should be.
Totally. So, I mean, I believe that's it. In our next episode's marketing, but just to kind of recap, I do think branding is, one of the most foundational pieces if you're going to go out to the marketplace, market and sell your product. So right after you've developed it, you really do want to build this foundation. Define who those target audiences are, what makes you different in the marketplace, how do you look, sound, and feel, what are the key statements that you're going to use, how do you message that out, and then what are the physical elements of like color and fonts and other pieces that you're going to use in all of these different materials. And so developing that, making it consistent, making sure everybody on the team uses it and follows it, definitely one of the most foundational things before you move into marketing, because when we come out and do marketing campaigns, we're going to use all this stuff to help us sell and market and convince and convey and all of those other con words.
So if you like this stuff, this was a quick overview. Brand is a deep topic. We can talk for days on this stuff, but I do encourage everyone to go and look at our last show that was focused on brand strategy. We really went through all those steps in much greater detail, step at a time, and we have a guidebook that goes along with that, so I encourage everyone to go take a look and check that out.
Yeah, cool. Well, we'll see everybody next week for our last episode of this series on marketing. Probably last tip, and then we're going to get into kind of a recap, but we're winding down here at the end. Make sure you show up, go check out those past episodes, and have a great weekend.
Awesome. We'll see you guys next time.
All right, bye-bye.